Good afternoon everyone, and thank you for joining me again. So literally as soon as I'd done the video earlier on today, I think like early afternoon, there was news out about what Putin's been saying, in response to something we spoke about in the video earlier on today. If you've not watched that, guys, go check it out. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe on my videos, guys. Really helps me out when you do that. Excuse me. But basically, Putin's recent comments where he's literally, he's vowing punishment on the West now. The language is becoming very clear. So what he come out and said is because of the 50 billion aid package for Ukraine, he's come out and said that this is gonna, there's gonna be punishment towards the West. Now, when you have a conflict, a war, usually the loser will have to pay reparations to rebuild infrastructure, to rebuild, the country, to compensate its people. So, while everybody lots of people in the news and the media, they're talking about, can Russia win? Can NATO win? Can Ukraine win? What do we mean by win? Do we mean, losing all our young men in a war that nobody really is going to benefit from? Do we mean changing borders for no apparent reason? What do we mean by win? What does Russia want as a win? Now, mainstream media have focused on this article, but they're kind of focusing on the wrong thing. They're focusing on this potential ceasefire that Putin proposes, but I'll come on to that later. So, what do we feel a win would be for Russia? Now, those of you who understand history and understand the fall of the Soviet Union, Vladimir Putin was at a very impressionable age when that happened, and these things stick with people and these things mold people. So this is just my opinion, my thoughts, my considerations. I think Putin wants to restore the glory, if you can even call it that, but the size, basically the geographical borders of the Soviet Empire. And I don't think he's going to stop. I don't think he'll stop until he's got that. What we can take from Putin is he's very, very good at playing the Western media or the Western politicians. Because don't forget, Western politicians, they get 4 years in the job and then they usually get sacked for being rubbish. So let's put into context that the first British Prime Minister that Vladimir Putin had to deal with was Tony Blair. Guys, this is, he's been in there a long time. Sorry guys, I'm not fully caffeinated. So he's been in that position a long time in Russia. Yes, he's had various positions, but he's there for a long time now. So when he's looking at the West and our, one must seem like, if you look at the situation of Russia, and they're looking in at the West, and we're having elections every 4 years and changing policies and having new people come in with new ideas, and then they're getting shot down in flames because they can't get past the bureaucracy. Putin must just be sat there thinking, Yura, look, don't worry, another 4 years some other idiot will be in charge, then we'll deal with them. Yes, of course. So it's really strange. Now, for him, for the Russians, they understand that the West, apart from the Ukrainian front line, there's nothing else now, guys, all right? There's nowhere for the Ukrainians to fall back to, apart from the River Dnipro. Now, if the Ukrainians fall back to the River Dnipro, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be World War III, because NATO will have to send, their forces into Ukraine. That's why I feel these countries were allowing Ukraine to fire weapons inside Russia. But, I guess that's a different story. What we're talking about here is what would be a win for Russia. So, if Russia pushed up to the Dnipro, why would they stop? Why would they stop at that? They know the West's manufacturing capacity isn't up to standard. They know the West is in turmoil with leadership, with its own internal political squabbling. So then they could push to the other side of the Dnipro. And then when they get to Poland, why wouldn't they keep pushing? And their buffer argument, they have this argument about creating a buffer zone. they can just continue that argument until they feel like it, until they themselves decide that that is enough of a buffer zone. Because the argument saying, oh, we want a buffer zone between us and NATO. Well, where's the argument for Finland? Finland are right on their border, Russia. Where's the argument with Finland? Why is Putin not sending tanks up to Finland in the Finnish border? It makes no sense, this argument of the buffer. So, for me, guys, all right, I don't feel that there'd be a stop in Ukraine. I feel this would push through. It pushed through to the Baltic region. It pushed through to Poland. And at what point are people in the West going to understand what this menace is? So a win for Russia. I think if you give a win and you put a boundary on it, that boundary will continue to get pushed. What would be a win for Ukraine? It's hard to say what a win for Ukraine would be either. The Ukrainians can throw the same argument back at Putin. They can say, right, okay, we want you out of our country and we want 20 kilometers of your territory because we feel that that's where you're launching attacks from. So it's very difficult to say what a win is. And, as someone who's lost friends myself in the military, in wars around the world, I would just like to see, these young soldiers not killing each other anymore. Just if we could just have that as a basis of, negotiations, that would be fine. But the reality of the situation is, and we've seen this since 2014, if there is a ceasefire, they'll be firing, they'll be fighting. People will still be fighting. Even if both sides said now, hey guys, let's have a ceasefire, they'd still be fighting there for the next 10 years. The amount of hostility, splinter groups of splinter groups, like I said, the amount of munitions there and all that sort of stuff, it's just a ridiculous hotbed for, conflict. Going back to 2014 as well, with the ceasefire and, first of all, Putin, again, another example of how Putin played the West. The West was saying, have you sent troops into Crimea? And Putin was saying, he must have laughed to his generals afterwards when he said this. The West asked him, have you sent, have you got soldiers in Ukraine? And he said, I have no regular forces in Crimea. Of course they're not regular soldiers, these would be special forces. Now, if anybody in the West had a brain cell between them, they'd say, whoa, wait a minute, lad, mate, what about special forces? Do you have special forces? Because while Putin, he's brilliant with his words and how he manipulates the West and how he just plays the West absolutely brilliantly. And Western media fall for it all the time, and it's embarrassing to watch sometimes. So what would a win for Russia be? We don't know. What would a win for Ukraine be? Who knows? But I think, as paradoxical as it sounds, I think for peace talks to be able to be legitimate, I think both sides need to say what a win would be. Because without understanding how close or far away you are to completing your objectives, you can't really negotiate into peace talks. But I've not heard anything. I've not heard what Russia says a win would be. I've not heard what Ukraine would say a win would be. And again, I'll come on to what he said about the ceasefire later. So what I'm going to read you now, guys, is a little article that if I can find it. Yeah. Little article here, guys, from Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera are kind of the only people who have highlighted the correct stuff. So this is from today. Russia's Vladimir Putin has denounced an agreement by Western countries to provide Ukraine with a loan package using frozen Russian assets and pledged retaliation. Speaking at a meeting on Friday with officials from the Ministry of Affairs, Putin said leaders in the West were trying to come up with some kind of legal basis for the asset freezers. But despite all the trickery, theft is still theft and will not go unpunished. Look at the use of his words there, guys. Punished. That's a strong word to use if you're a world leader. Will not go unpunished. And Putin doesn't usually make wild threats. He'll let one of his gophers, one of his one of his press secretaries do that. So this statement, this is what everybody should be focusing on, but they're not. They're focusing on the wrong thing. So yeah, and you know, on the base of it, you know, the West is trying to come up with some sort of legal basis for the asset freezers. Now, this is what we said in the previous video I did. If people lose faith in the dollar, by which if you don't do something that the Americans agree with, they'll freeze your assets, which is what you're seeing here, people will leave the dollar and people will find something else, and lots of people are going to the BRICS nations. He added Moscow's treatment was proof that anyone could be next and punished by an asset freeze. So what he's doing here, I think he's setting the ground for, you know, a retaliation. He's also pitching the BRICS nations and the BRICS, you know, the BRICS partnership. Because obviously, the stronger the BRICS gets, the more people go to BRICS, the less people are dependent on the US dollar, the less people are dependent on NATO protection. Putin's comments came after the G7 group members agreed on an outline deal for 50 billion loan package. Yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah, following the outcome. However, here we are, guys. So the details of the agreement are expected to be finalised in the coming weeks, and the money is expected to reach Ukraine by the end of the year. Will that be too late, and where will that money go? Will that money go into Ukraine? Will that be spent on, you know, for example, will German companies replenish their own stocks and say, "Oh, we've already given it to Ukraine"? Will that just be given as a bulk, you know, turn up in pallets of cash to Ukraine? We don't know. You know, the devil will be in the details. And then we go further down. Now here it is, guys. So that should be the main thing that everybody's focusing on the media, but they're not. They're focusing on the conditions that Putin's given to end the war, and they are preposterous. Putin also laid out a series of conditions to end the war in Ukraine, including the country dropping its NATO ambitions. You know, so I think you know, looking objectively, you can see the argument there. You can see the argument. And the withdrawal of its forces from the 4 Ukrainian regions that Russia claimed in a referendum that the West and Kiev called illegal. Guys, this is absolutely ridiculous. Now, these referendums were lower the context. So imagine, so in the previous video, I gave an example as if somebody's taken part of your garden. So imagine somebody's taken part of your garden, right? And then, you know, the law, you're in court and and the person who's taking your part of your garden saying, no, look, I've got a legal document here. And the judge looks at it and says, what's the legal document? He says, oh, look, it's a, what would it be? I don't know, deed of variation or something. And you've got some document you wrote yourself and you've signed it yourself. Guys, these elections that happened in, you know, in the regions in Donbass, I'll come on to them in a minute. But the elections that were held in these regions, they have no credibility. There's no credibility. There was no international observers. You know, the country was in occupation. It's absolutely preposterous that, you know, Putin, he's coming out with this. But he knows, because he's a smart guy, and you can't say he's not, you know, he knows that the Western media will jump on this and they'll say, oh, look, Putin wants peace. Putin's wanting peace. You know, he's putting out his, his roadmap for peace. The conditions are very simple, the Russian president said, ahead of a Ukrainian peace summit starting on Saturday in Switzerland that is due to be attended by, here's another awkward one, is due to be attended by representatives of more than 90 nations and organisations. So let me just say that again, 90 nations and organisations. Now, to me, that means there could be 2 nations and 88 organisations. Who are these organisations that are involved in political peace talks? I don't know. What is it? Like Red Cross? Asda? Tesco's? Who's involved? Who are these organisations? You know, I get nations being involved because they've got a stake. You know, the Baltic nations, Poland, Germany. You know, all these nations have stakes. You know, they're stakeholders, I guess, in this peace process. Organisations? I don't know. So Putin goes on and he says, as soon as they declare in Kiev that they are ready for such discussions, and begin a real withdrawal of troops from these regions, including Donbass, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia, and officially announce the abandonment of their plans to join NATO on our side immediately, literally at the same minute, an order will follow to ceasefire and begin negotiations, he said. Now, let's just look back through history. Let's not even go back through history. Let's look at when they shot down MH17 over occupied Ukraine. The Russians didn't hold their hands up. They didn't say, yes, it was us. It was a massive mistake. They, Billingcat did an awesome, what's the word I'm looking for? Open source intelligence gathering, and they traced those vehicles back to where they came. I don't think there's any dispute these were Russian held and Russian operated vehicles, launch systems that took down that aircraft. So look at how the Russians reacted to that situation, and then so you can't really take it. You've got to look at the deeper wording. You've got to look at what they're meaning and what it could mean. So let's read that again. At the same time, at the same minute, an order will follow to ceasefire and begin negotiations. Okay, fine. Will that order be observed by the generals on the ground? Will that order be respected? Will that order be recognised? Is anyone going to follow that order? Or will there be something underneath to tacitly say that this won't happen? When the Minsk agreements, or the ceasefire agreements were in place, there wasn't any letting up of fighting. All that happened was when the OSCE observers would drive around, they would just stop fighting in that region. And then, because both sides were on encrypted Facebook groups, and they would just tell each other where the OSCE observers are, and they would stop firing in that region, and then they'd be firing elsewhere, and it just murkies this whole situation. And then, I repeat, I will do this immediately. Naturally, we will simultaneously guarantee the unhindered and safe withdrawal of Ukrainian units and formations. That I think he would do, because they don't really have the capacity. I don't feel they have right now the capacity to, the way this war is, you've got front lines. So if these guys are withdrawing tactically, I don't think they have the capacity to follow up. But, these words don't really mean any. Well, they do. They mean stuff. But you've got to understand the deeper meaning of these words. So they can give an order, but if the order's not observed by the generals, who's going to go out there and enforce that order? For example, Putin can give the order, immediate ceasefire unless you're attacked. Then that order means nothing, because the generals, the colonels, whoever's in charge, they can claim they're being attacked and they can continue this fighting. And then the article goes on and it says, people are just disputing it. But what I want to put to this, and my added observations as I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the military build-up, I'm looking at the divisions that are new, I'm looking at the build-up in Sumy that's not going away, I'm looking at the build-up all over the, all over this space. I think this is a 4D chess move by Putin, so he can say, right guys, look, I was asking for peace, you didn't give it me, now we've escalated, now we've pushed in. The deals that Putin are giving, it's so preposterous that you can just take a piece of, take like 1/8 of someone's country and then claim that it's their fault for not having a ceasefire. Guys, absolutely wild times we are living in. I think that I think there's going to be another escalation imminently, and guys, it always seems like I say things on this channel and they literally happen a couple of weeks later. So that's what I think is going to happen. For you guys at home, if you're in the UK, if you're in the US, think about what's happening. Think about, and guys, especially if you're American, keep your eye on the dollar value, keep an eye on what's happening with your currency, because I honestly think there could be a dollar run where other countries, like a bank run, but a lot worse, like, other countries start to lose faith in the dollar, so they start to, ask for their money back that they've invested in US dollars, in US treasuries. If that happens, there will be a huge devaluation of the US dollar. Again, guys, this is not financial advice. I'm not able to give you financial advice. If you want financial advice, find a competent financial advisor, if you can find one. But that's it, guys, okay? Just keep an eye on what's happening around the world and make sure you're ready whenever this happens. Guys, I'm going to mag to grid.